So Mark Buckaloo is here to talk about each and us favorite topic, traffic safety. So this is forward, and then the forward. This is to forward the slide, and that's like a
This is backwards.
Yep.
Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Performance Management for their work in putting this thing on. I know it takes a tremendous amount of effort. It's above and beyond their duties, so special thank you to them. I think it behooves all of us to thank Pam, otherwise she's going to turn our water off again and turn our internet. Let the record show we're about a half hour behind schedule. Okay, it's not traffic safety holding up progress. It was planning's fault. A few things I want to talk about. I want to update some of our, go over some of the design updates. This happened over a year, probably about a year ago. Still seeing some questions, so I want to talk about some of those. Some common issues we see on construction sites and maintenance projects. I'll give a little update to the transition from NCHRP 350 to MASH 16. And finally, I'll talk about special events for a brief period. MOT Design Changes, permanent warning sign plan, it's not always needed. We're trying to eliminate some paper here when possible. We want to combine the general MOT notes when space is needed, or space allows. We also want to include special project-specific notes. Sometimes there's special events that we're aware of on a project, and we want to make sure that they're included in there so the project's aware of it, and we can coordinate those activities. For the contents, you should have an overall layout map, a sign legend, label all key roadways with direction arrows, especially if you're in a city or a small town. Include higher fine signs, and you really don't need to have this plan to scale. Some MOT design changes. We're well aware, PCC barrier wall deflects 4 feet, so in some situations we need to pin the barrier. We want to make sure that that's called out on the plan so the construction staff know exactly which section of barrier wall needs to be pinned where you don't have the deflection in the construction zone. It also gives the contractor an idea what he's bidding on as far as quantity. Some other design changes are we want to do some hashing where the length of need behind the barrier wall. Several years ago, a young lady lost her life. She got in behind a barrier wall. Not saying this was the case in this situation. Most crashes, there's more than one reason. By showing this hashing kind of gives the construction staff and maintenance staff an understanding that you can't have any equipment or material in this run-out length behind the barrier wall. You want to give vehicles, in case they run off of the road, a nice clear path to maybe recover their vehicle where they won't run into a fixed object. By showing this hashing, kind of gives everybody highlights the zone we're looking for. And we also want to show the taper inside lane closures. Depends on the speed, but trying to take guesswork out of what that formula is for what your taper is shown on the plans. By showing it right on the plans, the contractor knows, the construction staff knows exactly how long that taper needs to be. We also come up with a new flag or a head sign that says METC compliant. You put your own face in there. Some common work zone issues. I know the secretary wants us to be innovative, and some of these flagger paddles are. They double as a shovel or a broom, but they're not compliant. One gentleman was very innovative and created his own sign stand with these footrests and actually came with a cup holder. Pedestrian detours, I know it's a problem. I know it's difficult. We go on these construction projects. You have a lot of hurdles you're trying to get through, and pedestrian detours is just another hurdle you have to deal with. I have a fantastic staff, and I rely on them heavily. And I tell you, if you run into a problem, you have to have a pedestrian detour. We'd rather use typical applications. But if you run into a problem, we'll work with you on helping you get some sort of ped detour to get you around the construction zone. As the sign shows on the right, where we have sidewalk closed, use the other side, those days are behind us. So we are multimodal transportation state. So we need to make sure we provide pedestrian detours. I was at an ATSA conference last weekend. This is not going away. This is going to increase. It's also going to get a lot more into bike detours when necessary. So you may see some bike detours. If we need to design them on the plans, we will. Still seeing some signing issues. If you have a temporary sign, it's up less than 72 hours. It needs to be at least 5 feet above the ground. When you placing signs, you want to make sure they're not directly behind another sign. The traveling public needs to know exactly what they're coming into. If they're driving into a detour, they need to know that ahead of time. If signposts aren't driven to the proper depth, we're going to know pretty quickly, because the first windstorm that comes through, that sign's going to be laying over at a 45-degree angle. We've all seen them. So make sure they're driven to the proper depth. Impact attenuators. By at this point, we're starting to get a lot more used to impact attenuators, understanding their role and situations when we need to use them. Want to make sure that the bolts are torqued all the way down, so that impact attenuator sits tight against the pavement. If it gets struck, it'll act properly. Here's a picture of the cartridge inside of the impact attenuator. That cartridge isn't doing any good sitting on top. It needs to be inside the system itself. And there's also a clear zone beyond the impact attenuators where you don't have equipment parked or vehicles. I'm not sure whose car this was, but obviously if a car gets behind in the work zone, they're going to hit the car instead of the impact attenuator. Temporary barrier wall. Again, barrier wall deflects 4 feet if it's not pinned. If you have a drop off inside that 4 foot, that barrier wall is going right into the trench, and that vehicle is going to enter the work zone. So we want to make sure that we look at the plans when we're designing them, and make sure when construction lays this wall out, that they're going to have the proper 4 foot deflection. The far picture on the right. So, actually, let me go back to this middle. This middle picture, the X was the first time this barrier wall was marked out is incorrect. 6 months later, it came back, the wall's still there, so we marked it again with a circle. The wall stayed there several more months. The reason why we mark out the wall is if it's cracked or excessively chipped, that it has to be removed. It can create a safety hazard, and that wall is not going to react properly. As you can see in the last picture, this wall is actually split in half. Does anybody know what's missing in this wall that's split in half? Thank you, rebar. There's no tension continuity in this wall. Some of the things we're looking at is, right now our spec reads that all temporary barrier wall must have a letter that shows that it's 350 compliant from the manufacturer, or the wall needs to be stamped as 350 compliant. I think every piece of barrier wall needs to be stamped. That way the inspection staff in the field knows whether that wall is 350 compliant or not. This wall is bought and sold and bought and sold. Nobody knows whether or not the actual wall that they have was constructed properly or fabricated properly. So look for that spec update. We'll be talking about that and debating that this year. I know the DCA may draw exception to this because a lot of these contractors have wall in their yards. We need to sunset some of this old wall, especially as we move into MASH, which I will get to. Work zone issues, we need to make sure there's positive protection. This is along Route 1. There wasn't really a buffer lane. There's no TMA. We have a blunt end barrier wall. We need to make sure if we're working along the roadway in a high-speed area that there is a TMA behind the construction equipment, and make sure there's positive protection for the blunt end of that wall. Same project. We worked the construction a lot to work through some of these issues, but this contractor just didn't get it. So I seen this shot. Again, we had vehicles, no buffer lane, no positive protection for the blunt end of the barrier wall. I guess they tried to get the taper set in the barrier wall, but again, this really wasn't the proper taper. They tried to taper this one. They tapered it right into the excavator. Not sure what they're trying to accomplish with this one. Again, no buffer lane. As you're entering a work zone, you need to make sure that you are displaying a clear message. So as the vehicle's coming in, they know exactly what to expect. We need to do our part. We ask vehicles to slow down in work zones. We also need to do our part and make sure we're displaying a very clear message in what's going on. So I hope this plays. I hope that Pam, you think this will play? So this is a video that we took going northbound on Route 1. They'll play? Awesome. Everybody makes mistakes. It's easy to do. Also, but you want to be cognizant of what you're doing in your vehicle to notify the public of what to expect. Go ahead and hit play for me. Kind of looks like when we get released for lunch. Everybody go to that door. Next one. Oops. I got control. Here's our MASH update. I'm talking about Radar or High Lips Houlihan. I'm not calling her that. That was her name on the show. So as we change from NCHRP to MASH 16, we're all aware of the sunset dates for, I'm just going to jump right into sunset dates. So, and the end of 2017, we changed our guardrail from 27-inch to 31-inch. This is all to stay compliant with MASH. Recent sunset date that we had with the W-beam end terminals, which was the middle of last year. We worked with a consultant to help us create an approved product list for W-beam terminals, put it right on our website. If you're a contractor bidding on a project, you know exactly which end terminals you're permitted to use. You know what bid prices you need to put in. If you're in construction or maintenance, you can go right on the list and know exactly which products we allow on Delaware roadways. As we moved into the end of this past year, crash cushions were a part of the sunset date. Again, we created an approved product list for projects bid prior to December 31st, 2018, and a second list for projects bid after January 1st, 2019. There's two different lists that are on the website right now. So be familiar with when your job was bid to know what you should be looking for on the approved product lists. As we start looking forward to MASH and transitioning from 350 to MASH 16 compliance, the end of this year is going to be a big one. Cable barrier was supposed to sunset at the end of 2018. Unfortunately, there wasn't any products available that were MASH compliant, so the feds pushed the date. They pushed it out to the end of 2019. I think there will be some products coming online. Again, if you have a project that's already been bid, you can continue to use 350 compliant cable barrier. I don't really see much wrong with it. That's exactly what we're doing on Route 1 and 95 right now. We're putting in 350 compliant high tension cable barrier. At the end of this year, bridge rails, transitions, and all other longitudinal barrier, including temporary barriers, are going to need to be MASH compliant. That means temporary barrier wall. If you have a project that's bid after this year, you're going to need to make sure that that barrier wall is MASH compliant. And that's when I get back to updating the spec. I think we need to have every piece of barrier wall with some sort of stamp on the inside face that shows whether or not it's MASH compliant or not, or 350 compliant. That way the staff in the field knows exactly what's being set. All other terminals, sign supports. Sign supports, there's a couple signs right now that are MASH compliant, but the amount of signs we use on the roadways, it does not include all of them. So sign supports are going to change if the dates hold, if the feds don't push the date. This means 4x4 posts, which we use on roadways right now, did not pass the MASH testing criteria. It failed. 6x6 posts with 2 holes drilled in the bottom failed the testing criteria on the MASH. So if they're going to continue to do more tests on some of these wood posts, but if nothing changes, we will not be able to use these on our roadways at the end of this year. And that means small townships, you know, you're welcome to Selbyville or Bethany that has the 4x4 posts, which is a nice decorative sign. We may need to talk about whether or not we're going to accept those or not. And the big one, temporary work zone devices. At the end of this year, all work zone devices, a job that's bid at the end of this year, need to be MASH 16 compliant. That's a big one. We have a lot of bid items that fall under the temporary work zone category that are going to have to be MASH compliant. So why do we change, and why does MASH change? Because our vehicles change. The size of our vehicles change, the center of gravity of our vehicles changes, the makeup of the vehicles. I mean, some of the trucks now are of aluminum bodies, which is crazy to me, but hey, it is what it is. We're starting to evolve. The manufacturers are evolving, so we have to change our testing criteria, which is why MASH changes. Wasn't that long ago, the tapered down barrier wall, shown in this video, was the norm. This was acceptable, right? You could go on Google Earth back a couple years on 95. This existed on 95. It's crazy to me. But it was the norm. No one questioned it. It was the norm. What's next is for our approved product list. This is why we have approved product lists. These products get tested to make sure that they're going to react properly. Our safety section right now is working on approved product list that's 350 compliant. Right now, every contract, they submit that big fat 350 packet. If we just have a list of approved products that are 350 compliant, it'll cut that out of it. It'll also help us roll into MASH compliances. As MASH 16 compliant devices come online, we can just update those item numbers and put in there whether or not they're MASH compliant or not. So why do we have NCRP 350 and MASH? Can we play this video? It's not playing automatically. You're going to see in this video where some of our roadside safety hardware worked great. Some of our roadside safety hardware did not work great, which is why some of the things that we have and use has to be updated, and especially some of our barrier wall. If it won't play, that's fine. There we go. Coming from the right side of the screen to the left. Some of the guardrails worked properly. Some of the guardrails did not. Some of the barrier wall, some of the MASH compliance, the barrier wall had to get higher, which is why that tractor trailer went over the other side of the roadway. So why is product testing necessary? Wasn't that long ago we had the ET Plus that penetrated vehicles, massive lawsuit. Change the way we do things. We want to make sure that whatever we're putting out on our Delaware roadways is going to react properly. So why you have product testing. We get incredible, we're getting a lot more requests for guardrail to be installed across the state. Some of the stuff we push back on, Pam fully aware of. Just because sometimes guardrail isn't the answer. Sometimes installing guardrail can be a greater hazard than actually running off of the roadway. Ideal situation, vehicle goes off the roadway, they're able to recover on their own. This is worst case scenario. This person lived through this, by the way. So just make sure the barrier we put out in the field doesn't become greater hazard than a vehicle running off the roadway. I'm going to close out with special events. So what are special events? These are parades, concerts, NASCAR events, running races, bike races, block parties, anything that happens on Delaware roadways. Last year, there was over 800 events that were approved under special events section. Of those 800, 275 required DelDOT to manage the MOT for the event sponsors. We're currently seeing an increase in special events within the state of approximately 10% a year. So why am I bringing this up? Why does this affect you? Well, it affects your projects, for one. Under Title 17 of the Delaware Code, Section 141 and 29, policy changes are made that temporary traffic control costs for special events will be waived for nonprofit and charitable events. So if you're a nonprofit, and you're doing a special event on Delaware roadways, and we have a lot of them, you'll be able to have us come out and take care of your MOT for you at no cost to the event itself, because this way the money that the charity raises goes right towards the charity. But this also puts an additional strain on our resources and our capabilities, because we only have so many people. So what does this mean for you? We want your help if you want to. If you want to fill out an SEO application, which is sent out annually, you'll need to take an incident management training course, which is taught by the Godfather, Professor Donaldson. You also need an ANSI 3 safety vest and steel-toe shoes, and you may need to provide your own work vehicle. Just because sometimes you need the aero panel, you may need to haul equipment. If you're interested, don't think it's a picnic. It's hard work. It's labor-intensive. We enjoy the time. We have a great staff. They have fun at what they do, but they also work very hard. If you're interested, you can contact Mike Rivera. Mike Rivera is going to do this presentation with me, but he decided to go on vacation with his wife and snorkeling and drink umbrella drinks, so that's Mike. Thank you. Any questions? I don't think we have time, but any questions? Oh, you do? Great.
Morning. Pam wouldn't introduce me, so I'm here to tell you. My name is Jason Hastings. I'm the state bridge engineer. I'm going to be presenting on the I-95 rehab project here in just a second. At first, I thought that Pam was really interested in the project, but I found out this morning that she just wanted to find out about Wilmington. So I guess that's what I'm here to talk about. It is interesting. So the last few presentations have all kind of been a little bit doom and gloom. We've been talking about PED crashes, and you saw some pretty nasty barrier crashes. And I'm about to talk about all the traffic impacts that are going to be on I-95 through Wilmington for a couple of years. But I want to start as soon as we get started. Okay, well, thank you. See, if she had introduced me, I would have gotten the instructions. So. So before I jump into I-95, I want to show a video real quick. It's a lot more uplifting, inspiring, and I'll touch on it here in just a second. It's about 3 minutes. I'm probably going to take the full 45 minutes. So. Okay.
Couldn't ask for a better site. Weather's been great, no bugs.
Anytime we're having lunch or a break, we're always talking shop, discussing what's next and different ideas and how we're going to do it.
It's been fun working with the locals. They've worked really hard and have been here every day helping us and really putting a lot of pride into their work.
country, the team, the people, everything has exceeded my expectations. It's been really good.
All right, so what in the world does that have to do with I-95? Well, actually, nothing. So one of the things, every year at the annual AASHTO Committee on Bridges and Structures meeting, they put on a presentation talking about an organization called Bridges to Prosperity, and they show off some of the things that they do. What this organization does is they go into third world countries and build pedestrian bridges to help connect communities with more urbanized areas so they can get access to education and healthcare. I'd heard the presentation many times, and for whatever reason this year it really clicked. And I happened to mention it to Jason Arndt and Craig Stevens on our way back, and they were all in on, they were as excited as I was about the potential. So we came back and pitched it to our group, and there was a whole lot of interest in the organization. So they're actually, normally they do a build every 2 years. They actually did a build last year, and they're going to go back and do another build this year, this time in La Marca, Bolivia. We're going to send a couple of members from our team. First one, Scott Walls. Many of you know him as the Young Engineer of the Year this year. He will be awarded, he'll receive that award on Thursday night at the Engineers Week banquet up in Newark. And then, of course, Craig Stevens, who is our state bridge design engineer. We're all praying that Craig just makes it back from this trip. So why do I pitch this to you? One, just to let you know what we're going through, or what we're working on. One of the things, many of you participated in the golf outing that we put on back in the fall. It was a way to help support getting these guys to and from Bolivia. Well, right now we have enough money to send them there. We don't have enough money to get them back. So, sorry guys, it sounds like you're stuck. They're cheering that they can't get you back. So one of the things, so Bridges to Prosperity is a nonprofit organization, obviously, and so, but part of that, because we're DOT and we have ethical rules and that sort of thing, they won't cover a lot of the costs, and so the cost to participate in this trip, at least the travel costs, are borne by the participants. We have raised a lot of money through different fundraising events. We did find out that the Bridges to Prosperity, because they're a 501c3, you can donate directly to them, and you can write in a line that is for Delaware participation. Any additional money above our goal would go directly to Bridges to Prosperity. Obviously, you need to work with DE or DAPE on any ethical rules, but we have gotten, in the past, we've gotten okays to have participation from organizations, industry organizations like ACEC or ASHE or DCA or NSBA or any of the many acronyms that we have that are related to the industry. So if you have a means, are interested in participating, let me know. I can get you the website, and obviously we would appreciate any help we can get. The build is coming up in April. It's the last 2 weeks of April. So obviously these guys are excited to be going there, but we do have a short time frame to try and help them, make sure that we can get them back. So. All right, so now what Pam actually wanted me to talk about. So many of you know we have a large project in the Wilmington area to rehabilitate I-95 right through the city. This project came about through our bridge preservation program. First, the viaducts came up, and then also the Brandywine River Bridge. Two huge bridges right in the city that if we just tried to work on only them, we would have bottled up the city of Wilmington for like 4 years. So we decided as a department that we did not want to do that to the city, and so we change over the scope to be a corridor project. And so we're really looking at I-95 getting as much work done in that period, in that stretch of I-95 right through the city in as short amount of time as possible. So we've kind of laid out some goals for the project. Obviously, goal one, this is a state of good repair project, so we're trying to maintain and preserve the I-95 corridor. We're looking to get extend the existing infrastructure for a 30-year service life. So, you know, rather than having Latania's guys out there on weekends and nights and, you know, having to respond to infrastructure, you know, potholes and patching and all kinds of other things along the corridor, we're hoping to avoid that over the next 30 years. One of the things that came up, there's a highway safety improvement location. So we're going to improve that while we're working within this stretch. And looking to improve roadway efficiency, trying to lessen traffic congestion, also at that same location. Looking to implement improvements in and around the city. We know this is going to be a big impact to the city, and so we're working with city and state officials, legislators, the city government as well, to try and improve in the area of I-95 as much as we can without expanding the scope, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. So one of the things that was implemented after the I-495 closure was these things called high priority work orders. So whenever anyone in the state calls, whether it's someone from DelDOT or our sidewalk inspectors, if you will, we have to, if it involves a dam, a bridge, a traffic pole, or a sign structure, the bridge management group has to respond directly to that request, that inquiry, and ensure that whatever that structure is safe. We have to do it within 24 hours. Actually, we have to do it immediately as soon as we're called, and then respond to the person within 24 hours. So since 2014, when this was implemented, nearly 20% of all the high priority work orders in the entire state have come in this corridor. So obviously this stretch is not only important for all the people in and around Wilmington, it's obviously a big piece of infrastructure, an aging piece of infrastructure that we need to address. And so, yes, so obviously we want to fix that leaky roof, if you will, since we're having to respond to it continually. Probably an ironic choice of words, and I'll let you, I'll talk about that in a minute. So project overview, right now the project limits extend from the I-495, I-95 split at the southern end and extend up to the US 202 exit. We're rehabilitating 19 bridges as part of this. Over 3 miles of pavement. There's a stretch between the viaduct and the Brandywine that we are fully reconstructing the pavement, and then the pavement to the south gets a mill and overlay. We are fully reconstructing 11 exit or entrance ramps. As part of that, I mentioned the HSIP location. It's the South Jackson Street, 2nd Street on-ramp to southbound I-95. So we're going to reconfigure that, and I'll talk about the details on that in just a second. One of the important things, you know, obviously from our standpoint, we want to get as much work done as we can under one contract, but that kind of hurts our local contractors, so we've worked with them. We've identified some work that can be broken out and done either in advance or after the mainline contract is done, making the big contract a little bit smaller, improving the risk of us actually, decreasing the risk of us making the 2-year window that we have. And then obviously giving our local contractors some projects that they are more comfortable bidding on. So, and I'll talk about each of those as well. All right, this is just a drone video of the full project limits. So this is the southern end. We've got 3 bridges, one over Norfolk Southern, one over the Christina, and one over the Red Mill, or Mill Creek. There's the viaduct. You see the stadium. Amtrak, which is our critical path on the project, by the way. It's going a lot faster there than in real life. The basketball courts there, that's one of our 4F coordination issues. You see the overpass section, that's the depressed section through the city. That's where we're reconstructing the pavement underneath. And there's the Brandywine River Bridge. So you have to have inspirational music whenever you're about to tell people you're going to jack up their commute for 2 years. Little history lesson, I-95 was built back in 1964. We widened it in 1978, which included the construction of the Martin Luther King Boulevard ramps. And then we did have a major rehab of the viaduct in 2001. I say major. It did include joints, but believe it or not, that was nearly 20 years ago, and that's kind of within the lifespan of joints. There's a little timeline for you. We started this project back in 2014, so literally around the time we had I-495 closed, we find out we need to work on the viaduct and also the Brandywine River Bridge. So it was a pretty crappy summer, I'm not gonna lie. Since then, we have really dived into design. Obviously, the early part was inspection and testing of the decks, see what really developed the scope. We've done a lot of design since then, and we've just recently kind of started the major public outreach effort. Obviously, a project like this is going to impact many people, so we want to get the word out as much as we possibly can. So I mentioned the breakout contracts. Right now we have 3. We have 1 to do many sign structures along the corridor, work that can be done off peak or off alignment without causing any impacts to traffic. The HSIP location I mentioned, the on-ramp from 2nd Street, that work can be done without impacting the I-95 traffic. So we're going to pull that one out and make that go in advance. And then there's a lot of substructure repairs along the viaduct that we're going to break out as a separate contract to follow up the mainline contract. We had some push to get this work done in advance, but to us it really didn't make a whole lot of sense for us to fix these substructures and then have our new our mainline contractor come in and attach scaffolding and jacking towers and all that stuff to our freshly repaired piers. So it just made a lot more sense for that to go after. So red dots are locations, sign structure locations to be removed. Blue are new sign structures. So, you know, we often talk bad about the MUTCD, but in this case, we're actually putting back 13 structures, but we're able to remove 21. So we're actually decreasing the number of sign structures that we're going to have along the corridor. You've probably seen these structures. This is the type that we're installing around the state. We've put up a whole bunch along the corridor, I-95, 495, as well as Route 1 over the last few years. The monotube structures there, very efficient. And then there's obviously the overhead. Just little details. Drilled shafts. There's typically these sign structures, they get founded on a drilled shaft rather than a shallow foundation, a flat footing. Large diameters, 15 to 30 feet into the ground. Obviously, through Wilmington, one of the things you notice as you're driving on I-95 is the rock outcropping. So a lot of this work is going to be socketed into rock. I mentioned earlier the MOT is pretty straightforward, off-peak. We're not really impacting traffic a whole lot. So the HSIP location, which is the 2nd Street on-ramp. Right now, it came up because of the number of accidents, 85 accidents in a 5-year stretch, which is really high for an interstate. Obviously, in addition to the safety concerns, this is a high congestion area. Obviously, whenever there's an accident, it just backs up traffic everywhere. But in addition, it's a substandard acceleration merge lane, and so traffic often backs up on the Jackson Street on-ramp, or people making poor decisions causes delays on I-95, and so it's very important that we fix this while we're here. That's kind of the area. See if I can do this without. All right. Yep. So here's on-ramp from Jackson Street. Here's the on-ramp from 2nd Street. They merge, and then they have the substandard merge onto I-95. So the improvement is extend the merge and acceleration lane, so we have a full-length merge. Remove both ramps and then reconstruct a new ramp from Second Street with a new bridge and MSE walls, widening the Wilmington Viaduct Bridge, so where it ties out, and I'll show you that in a second. We're going to be widening a few of the spans, and then as part of this, we're going to construct some improvements on the city streets. So as I mentioned, here's the two ramps, Jackson Street to the top, Second Street to the bottom there. And then this is the proposed alignment. So as you can see, we tie into the viaduct much earlier than the existing ramp, and that'll allow for a smooth merge. Some of the improvements to the city streets. So, you know, because we are getting rid of that Jackson Street on-ramp, now we have people coming from Jackson Street that still want to get on I-95, and now they're going to have to do kind of a loop in order to get on. And so we're going to add dedicated turn lanes to Lancaster and Second Street, as well as modify the lane configuration on Adams Street. As a big part of this, which will really help make the traffic flow efficiently, is to modify all the signal timings in and around that intersection. Let's see. So here's the area where we are adding the turn lanes and engineering drawing. You can kind of see we're going to have two left turn lanes on Lancaster, on Adams, and then on Second Street, all merging onto I-95. So this one will be a little bit more impactful than the sign structures. We're going to have the ramps obviously are going to be closed while we're reconstructing the new ramps. We'll have some shoulder closures along I-95, but obviously we're not impacting the mainline traffic there. Daytime, nighttime lane closures. And we will have periodic detour of MLK Boulevard. And finally, the other breakout contract, which is going to go afterwards, is just fixing performing some of the substructure repairs on the viaduct structure itself. Your typical substructure rehab work, concrete patching, some bearing plate replacements, that sort of thing. Let's see. All right, so, sorry. The main contract, we kind of had some ground rules. So right now it's currently in design, final design, excuse me. I mentioned, you know, we're doing our major public outreach. Construction duration, we're planning on starting in March 2021, and it'll be 2 years where we actually are taking a lane on I-95. So it's a 2-year contract or 2 years of MOT where we're actually directly impacting traffic on I-95. Because of that, we had very strict requirements on I-95 about what we could do. Some of the work that's involved in this, huge amounts of work, really. It's 10,000 cubic yards of an LMC overlay. You know, you're not normally seeing numbers that big. 100,000 square yards of hydro demolition. 15,000 linear feet of parapet. That's like 3 miles of parapet. 11,000 feet of roadway joints, so still over 2 miles of roadway joints, some of which we're going to be replacing with UHPC link slabs, which get rid of the exposed joint, which improves the durability of the substructure, the bearings and the steel beams underneath, and of course other miscellaneous repairs. Now, one of the questions we always get is, why can't you just add a roof over I-95? Right? That is not proposed as part of this. This project does not pimp my interstate, right? It is not. We are not on an MTV show led by Exhibit where he pimps out your, you know, whatever it is you're trying. They just want, you know, an extra $400 or $500 million added to their $200 million project. That's all. Unfortunately, we can't. You know, it's a great idea. There's probably other ways that we can go about that. This is not it. You know, I talked earlier about the timeline, and you know, this, by the time we get done with construction, it's going to be an 11-year project, and all we're trying to do is fix what we got. You know, if you have a house with a leaky roof, you're not going to wait till you have money to add on before you fix that roof, right? All right, here's some pictures of what we are doing. Hydro demolition. It's basically like a power washer on steroids. You blast off the overlay, gives you a really good bond for the new overlay. And that's them placing one of the LMC, latex modified concrete overlays. We talked about the barriers. So nearly 15,000 feet of single face and another 6,000 of double face. So some of the pictures that Mark just showed you in his presentation, you could actually see very similar accidents along this stretch. The median barrier at the southern end has a lot of punch throughs. You probably can see patched areas where there's guardrails just kind of holding it together. That's, for people running through. The barrier isn't really doing anything, and so we're going to replace all that barrier. Obviously, we're going to upgrade all the guardrails so it's MASH compliant. And I mentioned the mill and overlay before. So I mentioned the ground rules. So we have to, early on, we looked at whether we could close a direction of I-95. I believe the last time that a major rehab was done through the city, it could be done. Unfortunately, 30 years of traffic growth wouldn't allow that to happen. So we have to maintain at least one lane of traffic in each direction on I-95. So we've kind of laid it out where the 3-lane section in each direction, we're taking 1 lane down to 2 lanes in each direction. The 2-lane section, we're going to drop to 1 lane in each direction. We are under strict orders that it must be done in less than 2 years. It cannot go more than 2 years. And of course, we have to maintain a lot of egress and ingress in and out of the city through the ramps. So the ramps aren't going to be all closed at once. It's going to be staggered. And so we have to phase those as well. So a lot of the work, obviously, is requiring phase construction. We're going to actually put something a little unique. We're going to move traffic from one direction. So northbound traffic will be moved over to the southbound side. We're going to run what we call contraflow. And I mentioned the staggered closures of the I-95 on-ramps. And there will be periodic times where we have to close I-95 in order to do any of the MOT phase switches. All right, so this is kind of a typical section. The top is existing. You got 3 lanes in each direction. This is the part to the south as well as the part across the Brandywine. So those sections, is part of stage 1, where we have to get in and we have to reconstruct the shoulder to help to make it be traffic bearing. We are going to get in, take a lane in each direction, and improve the shoulder. And then stage 2 is when we do a contraflow. So we're going to shut down the northbound direction and move all traffic onto the southbound side. Well, one of the things I mentioned earlier was about that MLK Boulevard on-ramp. And so if you drive that way, you recall that is an on-ramp from MLK to the left-hand side of I-95 southbound. Well, if we have traffic running like this, how are we going to get people on and off? Well, we're actually going to use that, and we're going to run contraflow on MLK as well. So what is currently an on-ramp on the southbound will, during this phase, be an off-ramp for I-95 northbound. Of course, stage 3. So one of the advantages on the northbound side is that we have that MLK Boulevard on and off ramp. Unfortunately, on the southbound side, it's much more complex, and so we're not able to fully divert traffic onto the northbound side. We do have to we have to maintain what we call a collector distributor road, and so we have 2 stages in stage, or 2 phases in stage 3 where we have to switch. We actually have to do phase construction of that side. Let's see. So I mentioned that we have a lot of impacts to city streets. I mentioned the MLK Boulevard contraflow. We are going to have I-95, obviously with the lane closures, we're going to send traffic kind of scattering throughout the city. We've done a lot of projects in advance to help improve access in and out of the city. Carr and Marsh Road, we're adding a left turn lane as part of that project. We've got a bridge project up there on Northeast Boulevard where we're adding a left turn lane from 12th Street. Brianna's MLK sweep project is in construction now. That's improving access from the 13 corridor. And of course, the Christina River Bridge is nearly complete, and that will give access to the riverfront from 13 so people don't even have to get on I-95. In addition, there's a lot of locations in and around I-95 itself where obviously local traffic is going to increase, and so we are looking at ways to improve those streets as well. And here's the list right As part of a big project like this, we have a active traffic mitigation plan, where, you know, part of the contract documents are going to require the emergency response coordination between the contractor, DelDOT, and emergency response teams. Obviously, we're working out some details on snow events, how we're going to properly maintain traffic during those. I mentioned active traffic management system. We're going to just cover Newcastle County with message boards, which is going to have real-time information. We're also obviously going to use the DelDOT app, so people who are about to leave for work or leave work to go home can check their app and see which, you know, whether I-95 is the right route, or if you need to find an alternative route. We're working with John Sisson and DTC to improve, you know, other transit opportunities. And then, of course, we're working with major businesses and organizations like Rideshare Delaware in order to help employees find alternative ways in and out of the city. As part of this, obviously with increased traffic, we're going to have an increased structural demand on the pavement. And so we have about $40 million of paving in and around the city that we're trying to do over the next 2 years. So we can, and that includes pedestrian facilities. Obviously, we need to make sure all of our ramps are ADA compliant. We've worked out some terms so that some of the ADA work will carry on into construction of the mainline contract, as long as it doesn't cause an impact on any of our primary routes. Our path forward. So we have, I mentioned that we're in the midst of major public outreach at this point. We've organized what we're calling a community advisory group. So it's just a large group of people who are to be our liaison with the community. So it includes legislators, city officials, civic association, you know, presidents, reps, major businesses, a committee of 100, you know, anybody who has a voice out in the community to help us carry this message out. And in turn, you know, we're taking their feedback on things that, you know, that may be an issue during construction or even before, and, you know, we'll do our best to try and incorporate that into our work. We're working on a public workshop, we have a public workshop scheduled, or we're scheduling a public workshop in March. As part of that, we're hoping to unveil our public outreach video. We got some great footage of our secretary, who fired me 4 times that day. I didn't know this, but she doesn't like to be on video. As great of a speaker as she is, she doesn't like to be on video. So whatever you do, don't try to put her on video. Or you'll be looking for a new job like I apparently am. And obviously, moving forward, we have to finalize design. And as part of that, because, you know, we started this in 2014, we're not going to go to construction until 2021. We are going to go back out and re-inspect and test the bridges, make sure that all of our rehab repair quantities are in check, make sure the scope is correct, and then obviously start major construction in 2021. However, I mentioned those breakout contracts, and those should be starting later this year. Like a good manager, I'm putting someone else's information up here so that you can contact him if you have any questions after the video or after the presentation. But for now, if you have any questions, make sure you use the microphone, or I have to use this meme on you. All right. That's it. Any questions? Kevin, do you have a question? No? All right. Thank you.
Yeah. It's amazing that there's no questions when you actually have to use the microphone. So, thank you, or not thank you. So, okay, so thank you for putting us back on time. That's awesome. So Ryan is here to talk to speak on performance. So without further ado, come on up.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Pam and DelDOT for allowing Federal Highway to have a few minutes to talk about period of performance and how the effects on our federal contracts are. So for those who don't know me, as Ann Hersey mentioned earlier, I'm the Program Development Supervisor, and I oversee planning, environment, right-of-way, civil rights, and finance. So I've been in this position since about last summer. I'm still an engineer at heart, but I feel like I'm slowly evolving. So instead of looking at my own shoes, I look at somebody else's shoes when I'm talking to them. So I'm getting there. But so Pam sent me an email, I sent Pam an email back in fall and said, hey, I think talking about end dates and period of performance would be good for the winter workshop. So I get an email about 2 weeks ago, hey, are you still gonna do that? And so I'd like to thank Angela Picorio and Lynn Huggins and Ann Brown for helping me put this presentation together. So I know this is the outline is just we're gonna go over the background on the super circular from OMB, and then talk about key changes for affecting Federal Highway, and then also talk about period of performance. So I know it's a real exhilarating topic, and I'm sure that a lot of you are rolling your eyes in excitement, Dan. So I'd like to offer you the following. We were a little bit pressed with time, so I was going to cut it down to 3, but I guess we can maybe do 4. So the OMB is for Office of Management and Budget for the government, and under Title II, under grants and agreements, we have the Uniform Administrative Requirements and Audit and Cost Principles, kind of under audit, which is the Part 200. So to give you a little bit of a background of how it came about, the Office of Management and Budget, back in 2014, they decided to streamline government guidance and under cost principles and audit requirements. So the effort, or the super circular, was to essentially consolidate and eliminate duplicative guidance found in OMB, 8 OMB super circulars. The effort was to focus federal resources on improving performance and outcomes while ensuring the integrity of federal funds as in partnership with state, local, and tribal stakeholders. So there's the key areas kind of affecting Federal Highway are the pre-award, the post-award, and then the cost principles and the audit requirements. The period of performance kind of goes into 2 of these, the pre-award and the post-award, so I'll briefly touch on those. So the pre-award, there was 15 uniform data sets that they needed to do that have to be within FEMAS. 3 of those that they added under the agreement are the performance, which is the project agreement, or the end date, as most of you guys have been dealing with, the indirect cost rate, and then the catalog of federal domestic assistance, or the CFDA. So under the post-award, there is 7, I believe, areas. The performance measurement, the greater focus on internal controls, a payment, cost sharing or matching, period of performance, greater responsibilities for subrecipient monitoring, and then project closeout. But as you can see, period of performance is in the post-award as well. So you're asking, what is period of performance? So the period of performance is the time during which the grantee or subgrantee is expected to complete grant activities for the authorized scope and incur approval of funds. Oops. So essentially, the start date and the end date. So some of you are familiar with FEMAS, the Financial Management Information Systems. Some of you may not be. But essentially, the information goes in from fax into FEMAS. And then you put a start date for each phase, which would be PE, right-of-way, construction. And then that is the start date. So once you put that date in, you set your timeline. So then you also have your end date, which is where we'll talk about a little bit here. So in general, for a federal highway to authorize a project, we need a few things. It has to be in the approved current STIP. It has to meet all federal requirements from a NEPA standpoint, all the permits, and the project needs to be ready to move forward in 90 days. And then project costs eligible for federal reimbursement are incurred after the project is obligated by DelDOT Finance, and then the division off has approved it in FEMAS. And then the other thing is all projects have to have a start and an end date. And then just a quick note that any costs that are incurred prior to federal highway approval are not eligible for federal highway reimbursement. Or costs incurred after the end date are not eligible for federal highway reimbursement either. So why is it needed? Well, it prompts the state DOTs to evaluate scheduled and cost and release of unused funds within 90 days, and then recovering unexpended balances for other eligible purposes. It also establishes the point that no additional costs can be incurred on the project for reimbursement and requiring authorized work to be completed. And then the other thing it does is it prompts the project closeout process. So how does it work? And are there procedures? There sure are. So as effective November 1st, 2015, I don't expect you to read this. This is just a picture. Federal Highway and DelDOT got together and developed procedures for entering project end dates. So essentially, what will happen is the project manager within their division is responsible for supplying information to the finance section, and then when the work will be complete with respect to the following areas: PE, right-of-way, construction, railroad, open-ended phases, or other projects. And then the project manager supplies a phase completion date, and then finance adds the number of months to the end date based on those procedures. So for instance, if you have a construction project, the phase completion date is established by the project manager for construction and CE, and then the work's expected to be substantially complete, and then you add 90 days for time of inspection and final payment. Just a quick note, for larger projects, 90 days it's not the be-all, end-all, so we understand that there's going to be some flexibility if it's a fairly complicated project. So example, you have a 200 calendar day contract with a notice to receive of May 15, 2015. You would add the time of the contract, which is 200 days, plus the 90-day field wrap-up, and then your phase completion date would be 5/28/16. And then finance would take that information and then establish the end date. So the 5/28/16 is not the actual end date that will be into FEMAS. Finance has a formula for that. So you're asking, can you extend the end date? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. So the request to extend the end date needs to be necessary and justify any changes. Undoubtedly, something's probably occurred within the project. There was a re-advertisement, a redesign, weather delays. I mean, it could be anything that potentially could have changed the end date, especially when you're dealing with PE and construction. One thing I will note, FHWA is the only one who has the authority to change the end date, and it's not guaranteed. The end date can only be changed through approval via FEMAS, and any changes to the end date should be routed through Ann Brown and her staff. This gives Ann Brown and her, they should be sent well in advance of the end date expiring. This gives Ann and her staff enough time to review the request, ask for additional information, or just reject it. But then also, it gives us time to send to Federal Highway for review and approval. The other thing I want to point out is only work performed prior to or on an end date is eligible for participation. So with that, there's a couple videos. I always like to put videos of my kids or pictures of my kids. I don't know if they can get them to work, but so does anybody have any questions? Oop. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, I know it. All righty, so next we have Dave Kleinott. He's going to be giving everyone an update on CAD-related things.
So we'll say a big thanks to Pam for making the guy who's really good at computers do a presentation in front of like 300 people. Going to apologize for this in advance. There we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So this will be essentially an overview of a lot of the changes that are coming inside of from the CAD department. So I'll do kind of an intro, talk about Open Roads Designer, go over project-wise, cover electronic plan review, some internal changes as well. So go ahead and just jump right in. Again, I'm Dave Kleinott. Some of you may already know me. I'm the guy you call when you have a problem with your microstation, with CAD resources, with plotting, anything like that. So again, step one is you find out you have a problem. Then you contact me. I solve problems. And then we'll get into figuring out what the problem is and actually working on it. And then, almost instantaneously, your problem will be solved and fixed. So, there we go. All right. So, Open Roads Designer, or I'll probably call it ORD a lot. For those of you who are not aware, it's effectively going to be replacing Inroads SS4. So I'm going to assume you already know what Inroads SS4 is. And we'll just kind of go from there. But essentially, the modeling engine is more or less the same. So if you know SS4, you'll be pretty competent inside of ORD. So as far as the timeline goes, we're looking to do a trial project around the summer, so mid this year. And then as far as full implementation, we're looking to we're expecting to get to the end of this year for full implementation. If you're familiar with how SS2 to SS4 went, that transition will be about the same. So any new project done after that date will be done inside of ORD. So that was, 2020, right? That's what I said. All right, so what is new inside of ORD? For those of you who are, again, not aware, it's built into MicroStation Connect, which gives you the ribbon interface. So however you feel about the ribbon interface, you're going to have to get used to it. Yeah. And then if you've used SS4 in the past, you'll know that there are a couple things missing, specifically annotation and plan preparation. Those, again, are the big ticket changes inside of ORD. So why are we doing all this? Basically, as we get into ORD, it's going to allow us to produce plans, designs faster, more accurately. And as you're aware, 3D modeling is becoming a bigger part of our day-to-day lives and our jobs, and this further integrates that into design. So as a lot of you are aware, we've been upgrading a lot of the resources, specifically fonts, but also cells, line styles, all that good stuff. And a lot of this is for ORD, and as we move forward, there'll be many more resource changes coming for that too. So moving along, project-wise is effectively a document management system that is going to house all of our engineering data inside of it. If you're familiar with our internal structure, it combines parts of the Y drive, G drive, V drive, and the FTP. So kind of like a one-stop shop. Timeline. We already have some trial projects going on inside of ProjectWise now. We're looking to do full implementation around the summer, so midway this year. And this thing is slow. So as far as licensing goes, all consultants will be required to provide their own license inside of ProjectWise. And one thing I am looking at is for those who do not need the resources, constantly, be doing a zip file of our CAD resources, hosting that up onto the DRC, and that will be updated monthly. So again, implementation will be the same kind of way as ORD. Any date or any project created after that implementation date will be done inside of ProjectWise. So, and then for electronic plan review, as you guys are aware, department is trying to go towards paperless plans, and so one way of doing that is electronic plan review, and we are looking to go to Bluebeam Review and Bluebeam Studio for all internal plan reviews. And if you noticed out front, I was the guy standing next to that giant pen display, so you can go out there and try that out. One of the other things we're testing out is using that to aid in plan review, and also I've been testing with the iPad and Apple Pencil to be able to, which again all communicate back in through Studio in real time. and will allow us to do mobile updates and reviews and as-builts, that kind of stuff. So again, as far as licensing goes with Bluebeam, all internal employees will get essentially the standard version of Bluebeam, and a couple will get the higher level, I think it's called Extreme, for like form creation, that kind of stuff. But then if you're just reviewing plans, you can actually use the free version of Bluebeam, which will upgrade you when you sign into the studio to the commenting features that you need for that. So the next one is kind of more for the internal. We are going to be updating all the engineering trainings. If you're aware, those trainings were done back in MicroStation XM and SS2, so that's kind of old and need to be updated. So we're going to be working on that, hopefully have that done mid this year, around the summertime. They will be done in MicroStation V8i and Inroads SS4. There will also be some training done for ProjectWise as well. And then when we fully implement ORD, that will be, they'll be revamped for that as well. So then also we are going to be upgrading the intranet site through Microsoft SharePoint. So each section within Transportation Solutions will have their own intranet page, and I'll be assigning different people to manage, their respective section, and looking to have that early this year coming up. And I'm also going to have a template done for the Office of Performance Management, which people can use as a template and go from there, kind of. So, all right, that wasn't so bad. So if you have any questions, kind of talked a little fast. So if you have any questions, please use the DelDOT, if you have any CAD questions, please use the DOT CAD support email address. If you have any questions for me, you can contact me anytime. Also remember to sign up for DRC updates. We'll send out those reminders monthly, and any big changes go out through that as well. So, and if there's any questions, send them to the CAD support email address. So, okay. Cool.
Alrighty, well, we're really going fast now, so you can you don't have to rush if you don't want to. So Hav's going to do, what number update is this on 301 for workshops? Hopefully you'll be able to, I'm thinking at least this one and probably next year, hopefully not the year after that. So this is the forward button, and then that's the laser pointer if you need to, and that's the back button.
Okay, great, thank you.
And do you have any videos?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
They're gonna play. Perfect. Oops.
Okay, as Pam said, I'm going to be making a presentation on the US 301 project, some takeaways from the US 301 project. But before I get started, I'd like Chris Costello to come up here. Chris, can you come up here? This is Chris just before we opened up 301. See how excited he was? Yeah, absolutely. Chris was one of the most excited persons to open 301, and we want to thank you for that, Chris. But seriously speaking, I want to recognize Chris, not necessarily for 301, but I want to recognize Chris for his 25 years of service with DelDOT. And that's a heck of an achievement, Chris. And he's a person of excellence, and I'll tell you why he's a person of excellence, because he's an Eagles fan. All righty, that's why, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations, Chris. As a matter of fact, he's so passionate that you can find him sometimes. If we can pull this up. Oh, it's not working now. Oh, here it comes. I think I had too much of a delay. I'm not a technical guy. Where's David when I need him? You can find him climbing poles in Philadelphia. That's how passionate he is. But he's a passionate guy when it comes to construction. You'll never find a guy so much as passionate as Chris Costello. And the other thing is that Chris, this is a heck of a delay. Somebody's got to teach me how to run a computer. But the other thing that Chris does is he loves to hike. And he told me you're going to want a 200-mile hike in the Appalachian Trail sometime here. So Chris goes the extra mile for all of us here at DelDOT. He's a heck of an employee. So Chris, on behalf of DelDOT, I want to congratulate you. You even get a frame with your certificate. Okay. And you also get a little trinket. I'm not sure what it is, for your 25 years of service, and you get this envelope as well. And you don't have to sign anything that you got it. So everybody's my witness. Chris got his 25 years of service. Chris, great job, man.
Oh, thanks so much.
All righty. So what's amazing, some of the takeaways that amazes me about 301 is that it took 50-plus years for planning and design, and then they gave us 3 years to build this highway. That's incredible. That's an amazing thing. So to build over 14 miles of highway, I think is pretty fascinating. But you can see the hard effort and the work that many folks took. The other thing that's amazing, it takes an army of people to build this roadway. There's the consultants that you have listed here as well. And then, oops, let me go back. And then also the contractors that actually built this roadway here. We broke it up into two construction groups that managed this project. One was Group 1 Construction led by Chris Costello, and the area engineers, Katie Schwander, you can see, and also the area engineer, Susan Maldonado, and Group 2 Construction, John Ledger. The area engineer there also started out was Mr. Mark Buckaloo, but then he went over to the other side. Mark, thanks a lot. But Joe Spadaro took up the lead after that. So there's a tremendous amount of people that actually come out to do this effort. And so at the end of the day, then, who comes out and actually does the groundbreaking ceremony? Absolutely, your politicians, led by our wonderful leader, the secretary. But they're important, they're also an important part of the whole plan because they make it happen. The other thing is that there's a lot of contractors, there was a lot of coordination early on in the project to break this project up into multiple sections. And as you can see, there are many contractors that were involved. You had in-state contractors and out-of-state contractors that were involved with this project to make it very successful. So that was one of the key things in making sure that this project was delivered. The other thing is, what's interesting to note is that you got to make sure that when you put out dates, you have to be careful about putting out dates when construction because there's so many things that can happen. And so one of the first things we did, we put out dates out there. And we got started, the main construction in January of 2016. But prior to that, we actually had to do some advanced clearing contracts. And in construction, expect the unexpected was the other takeaway. There was these small little creatures called the long-eared bats, and they caused a major havoc for us. We had to do advanced clearing for them because apparently they have a certain mating season, and we didn't knock these trees down, then that would be a problem for them. So we had to go in there and actually do the work. And as you can see, we had construction to be completed by December of 2018, and then the entire project to be completed by summer of 2019. So the other thing is, it's important on major projects is to communicate effectively with the community. Make sure you put out information, and that's what we did. We had the construction informational meetings early on, and we continued them throughout the life of the project. We also had our weekly conference calls, and now we have bi-weekly conference calls where we just coordinate a lot of the activities that are going on throughout the corridor of US 301. That's extremely important to make sure that you get the proper message out there and that people stay informed. The other thing that's important to take away is that documentation is extremely important on a project, any project, but certainly a project of this size. Our partnership with the FHWA was extremely important. They lent us $211 million through TIFIA, and then we had to also borrow money, sell bonds, and pay for it that way. And there was other bonds that we issued, the Garvey bonds, and so it's extremely important that you manage and you keep the documentation very close, reporting out to all the US DOTs internally, to our finance section, and make sure that things are up to speed. The TIFIA reporting, we had to track the progress of the work in terms of the dollars spent and time. And we also had internal SharePoint sites where we were able to put everything, as much as we possibly could, into electronic files. We didn't use a unifier on any of these projects, except I think one of the last contracts, which was one of the landscaping contracts, we actually used unifier. But this was really prior to unifier really being implemented, but the shared document management system had to be kept very, very close. The other thing is we kept track of the schedule, made sure that we tracked the progress of the work was extremely important. A gentleman by the name of Emery, who was able to help us maintain the project schedule along with Mike Lafferty. And so you can see they tracked how each project was progressing for the entire corridor. We also kept track of little spreadsheets such as the earthwork. How was every project managing the earthwork? Were they behind? Were they ahead? There was a tremendous amount of dirt that had to be hauled, moved on this corridor, over 7 million yards of dirt, so that had to be managed. It was key to the critical success of this project. And here's a video. I don't know if it can be played from that end or this end here. Oops. And I'm going to show you, oops. Okay. So you're going to see a video here of the borrow pit. The dirt moving activities were extremely important on this project. So one of the things that the designers did early on was they identified areas where we could have these large borrow pit areas for each of the sections, or some sections actually shared some of the borrow pits, to be able to excavate the needed materials from the borrow sources for the needs of the project. So one of the borrow pits that I'm going to show you here is the Levels Pit borrow pit. And out of that pit, we generated over 3 million yards of dirt. Do I need to do anything up here? You guys got it in control. There you go. There you go. And so you can see the before, during the excavation, and the after product. This is also part of the commitment, was to deliver over 60 acres of wetland mitigation site and plant it as well. But it was important because out of this pit, we were able to excavate all the different types of borrows that we needed, from A borrow to B borrow, to your C, your D borrow, and even your common F borrow materials. And it was all quality material. They spent a lot of time going into this site and classifying the soils at different sites, at the different levels, rather, different depths. And also, it was important for the contractor to manage this site. The key in digging a borrow source like this is managing your water. If you can't manage your water, then you're not going to be successful with a borrow site. So early on, he had to dig his ditches. He put down his well points in these areas to drain as he excavated. And in this particular location, there was 2 contractors that were excavating from this borrow site. One had an interim milestone date where he had to be out of there. I believe it was early, I think fall 2017 or early. I'm not quite sure. And the other contractor managed, then took over the entire site. Both of them worked simultaneously, but then the 2A contractor stayed there and dug up the rest of the pit. So we were able, one of the key successes to this project was that we were able to reach an agreement between both contractors where they were able to go in there, reduce the footprint of a Section 3 contractor and enlarge the footprint of the Section 2A contractor. And then in return, Section 3 contractor then was able to get more time to be in the bid. So that actually really was extremely successful to this project because it allowed the Section 2A contractor to really go in there and hog the dirt. The interesting thing also about this is that found interesting was that the contractor kept the excavator 8 foot higher than the actual ukes. And the reason for that was so that he could just excavate and dump, rather than excavating, lifting up his excavator bucket and dropping. So it's amazing how much time you save with something like this. The other thing that this contractor did that he realized because of his haul roads, he was actually able to drive the ukes on the opposite side of the road because of the sharp bank and the efficiency of moving dirt in and out of the borrow pit. So at the end of the day, you're really amazed by the tremendous amount of effort. You got to figure these guys moved essentially 3 million yards of dirt in basically 2 construction seasons. We anticipated that the highest he would achieve dirt moving activities was about 10,000 yards a day. A contractor was able to actually achieve over 20,000 cubic yards a day on some days, very successful. So this was a tremendous effort by all the contractors to really get the project moving. And here's another video. What really is interesting about this is that we had commitments where we had folks come in with their hodags and their bags and their seedlings, and these guys planted thousands and thousands of seedlings. This was coordinated by Kenny Dunn's group and Christy. And so it's a tremendous effort after we had taken care of prepared the sites for the reforestation. Other thing was critical is the advanced utility relocation work. If you really want to have a successful project, to all the designers out there, everyone who's coordinating project development, is get the utilities out of the way immediately. You may not be able to get all of them, but if you want to have success to deliver a project like this in 3 years, you really couldn't be fooling around with any of the utilities. The other thing was just coordination with the first responders when we took lane closures, road closures, even their access points eventually onto US 301. We had to coordinate with all the emergency responders. It's extremely important to let them know what we're doing throughout the project. And then there's also environmental commitments, all the resource commitments. Here you have a photo of an animal crossing, a culvert. It's extremely important that everything that's written in the ROD that you committed to the public, that you committed to the USDOT FHWA, that you follow through with it. And we had environmental monitors there, whether we put up orange fencing early on. As a matter of fact, M&O was extremely helpful early on with when we did the advanced clearing contract to come out and actually set up orange fencing to get that contract started. And the other thing is, on SR1, we did in-place soil cement, and then we did also some pug mill. But on this project here, what was really interesting was that we just went all pug mill. You get a much better a product when you actually mix a product at a pug mill and then bring it out to the project. You get a much, much better product. And then finally, the concrete pavement, unlike SR1, spanned the full width of the roadway. We eliminated the hot mix shoulders, and we have concrete shoulders all the way across, which I think was an excellent idea for this project. There was 3 interchanges on the project. This one here, we had the Jamison's interchange. What was interesting about this project was that there was a runaround, but the contractor came in and just kind of changed things around. And he wanted a different approach to this, which DelDOT was able to grant. We had to work with our resource partners, our environmental groups, because there was commitments made there. And so we were able to expedite that and get that turned around. We had 28 bridges. Some bridges were very complicated, like this one, the flyover bridge over SR1. And so we had to manage all of the, certainly all of the construction in terms of administering this contract with working with safety, working with traffic to try to get this constructed. One of the interesting things here, I want to show you a video. I don't know if I showed this last time, but this is really an interesting video here where the contractor actually precast these beams, beam caps, reinforced beam caps in the median. And as you can see here, he did it overnight to actually start to set these beams over top of SR1. And he used self-propelled modular transport units. As you can see there in the background, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. And if something goes wrong, it's going to screw up traffic. And the first one we did actually tied up traffic. We were supposed to be off the road by 5 a.m. On Sunday morning, and we were off the road at 3 p.m. Now, mind you, we had shut down SR1 southbound. So you have to have the backup. You have to make sure that folks that you're communicating with, you're coordinating with, in this case, traffic safety, to get things in place. And the second time around, I think this was the second time around, I think Tom Clements always joked around, well, if you don't see sunshine or daylight, the next thing you know, everything went right or something like that, Tom. So, yeah.
They didn't like that. I told them in the second one, it was good that the sun didn't come up during the middle of the video, and they didn't think that was.
Yeah, they didn't think it was so funny. But that's the truth. That was the truth. So, you know, you can see there's a lot of rigging that has to take place here. You have these hydraulic gantries, as you can see here, and they actually, with a spreader beam, and they tie the actual beam. Now, these things weigh about 75 tons to 100 tons, each one of them. There were two of these. And so it's a tremendous mass of concrete that you're lifting, and you're setting it up on top of these columns. And so I must say that I want to give a shout out to WRA. You guys did a tremendous job in really coordinating with construction, the contractor, to really make this happen. These guys went above and beyond the call of duty. I mean, these guys were approving things that literally at the last minute, reviewing, going through the design, contractor submittal, and making sure that everything was correct. So I definitely need to give a shout out to those guys for an excellent job, well done. And then obviously you set it on the columns. There's still, once it's set on the columns, you know, now it's a matter of getting all the equipment out of the way, and that takes quite an effort to get that stuff out of the way as well. But these guys did a heck of a job doing this. Okay, and the other thing that's important in large projects, when you think in design, you got to think about, where do I have an area for my stockpile? Because you're moving such large quantities of dirt. You may have a topsoil that you strip through the project. You may have materials that you excavated that need to go into a different phase, and you need to stockpile the material. It's extremely important. It's much cheaper to excavate the material on site than to import the material. You're talking about a huge difference. Imported material from outside a project can cost you $20+ a yard, versus when you're bringing them from within the project, you're talking about $5–7 a cubic yards. And when you're talking about millions of yards, you're talking about a lot of money here. So it's important for that. Also, where are you going to put your trailers? Where are you going to stage your pug mill plants, your concrete plants? It's important to think about things like that. Other thing is, there was a lot of, one of the things that I learned very quickly is that the community wants, when you make a promise, you better deliver. So as soon as we hit the ground running, they wanted their visual berms there and the landscape. And they kept asking, when are we going to get our visual berms? When are we going to get the landscaping? And it's important to follow through with that. And not only the commitments that you made to the public, but also to separate your construction from those communities when it comes to dust, when it comes to just the visual. They don't want to see the construction. They just want to live peacefully in their communities. And then the other thing that was really good, the other takeaways about this project is that there was future planning. They thought about of the future spur road. So you can see off to the right there, there is actually an embankment that was built, and there was also one just beyond the screen here, just to the north of that road where it starts to curve. There was embankment that was placed there, and there was material that was also stockpiled for the future spur road construction. And then I'm just going to, if you could play this video as well, I just want to show you an example of one of the sections. This is section 2A, and when he talked about the tremendous, this is during construction, and to the right is the completed product. So you can see there's a lot of bare area that's exposed through there, but one of the things that the contractors did a really good job, for the most part, I'm going to say, is that they really were able to control the erosion and sediment leaving the project. They were able to maintain good E&S perimeter control throughout the corridor. You can see how they were able to also wet the grade to keep down dust control. On a project like this, some of the things you may also want to think about is applying maybe some chemicals if it really gets out of hand. We had in these 3 years during construction, we had probably some of the wettest seasons that we've had. 2018, I think, broke some records from what I understand. It was unbelievable. But through all that, the contractor was able to really attack this project very, very hard. Some of the things also on Bunker Hill, we just passed it. You got to think about not only motorist traffic, but there was also a high school adjacent to us, just to the west side, and kids were going across the crossing there, Bunker Hill Road, where we had these large ukes. So we actually had to place a flagger for pedestrians just to monitor the children, just to make sure that nobody was walking across these very large pieces of equipment. These guys were actually really hauling. If you ever got in front of one of these ukes, it was actually pretty scary. You actually had to pull over because these guys were literally flying. So you got to think about that. The other thing I did mention earlier was having the construction informational meetings. We had them, I think we were having them monthly, I believe, and then I think we switched to quarterly, and I'm not so sure we're having them at all now. But it was important, especially up front with the community, a lot of questions. They wanted to know what's going on. Also, maintaining your websites. I know the department's really pushing and trying to making sure the construction projects have up-to-date information on their website was extremely important. The other thing is the noise waiver. As designers, we need to make sure that we get noise waivers. We actually, during construction, we didn't have a noise waiver in place. So we actually had to work with the town of Middletown, with Newcastle County, just to make sure that we got noise waivers, because the contractor wanted to work for certain activities at night, especially concrete in the summer where it's really hot and you can't go, you have to go at night. So we worked with the town of Middletown, Newcastle County, and they gave us restrictions, basically, was in areas like sensitive communities like Spring Arbor or the Airmont up north, really try to stay away from some of those noise-producing activities. And so that was extremely important to coordinate with them as well. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that the designers really did a great job developing the plans on these throughout the corridor. There really were not major changes. Some of the buses that we got were some quantity changes and things, the quantities quite weren't correct. But other than that, there really wasn't any major design issues throughout the project. So they spent a lot of time early on during the project development phase to get things right. And also we were able to work with the contractors to really keep these projects moving forward. So it was really a tremendous effort by all parties. So just some interesting facts. Total, like I said, 28 bridges, about 4.7 miles of H-piles that were driven. Concrete piles, 12.1 miles of concrete piles that were driven. We had just under 30,000 truckloads of concrete that were delivered to the project or made on site. 113,700 tons of asphalt pavement, We had over 7 million yards of dirt that was moved, and we constructed 14.5 miles of brand-new roadway on this project in 3 years. Also, the interesting thing was we also worked we had the toll infrastructure contract, and we also had what do you call it? The toll, all electronic tolling system that had to be put in place. So we had to coordinate with the contractors to make sure that the ramps were available, that the fiber was being run, that the gantries for the foundation while we're constructing the main line. So there was a lot of coordination. And as somebody mentioned earlier today, we're generating about $1 million a month on toll revenue. So it's been a really tremendous success on this project. Despite Rob saying that it was frustrating, yes, there were moments that it was very frustrating. A lot of pressure we're under, but it got done. So it was a very successful project. Any questions? All righty. Thank you very much.